to stop the Marxist prosecutors who release rapists and murderers while persecuting Republicans, conservatives, people of faith, and me, by the way. I will direct a completely overhauled DOJ to investigate every radical DA and AG in America for their illegal, racist in reverse enforcement of the law. And we will bring back a thing called stop and frisk in our cities. On day one, I will sign a new executive order to cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, transgender.
If you do something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
So Trump in his New Hampshire rally, he was insinuating that for African Americans, that because the attorney generals happen to be Africans, that somehow it's reverse racism. And if you heard correctly, he said that he's going to bring back stop and frisk, and that he's going to stop critical race theory, meaning the African American civil rights struggles through the Martin Luther King era, the African American liberation for civil rights, as far as fighting to liberate themselves from slavery. Somehow Trump is trying to turn the tables on African Americans and make it seem like it's their fault. Like somehow they're unpatriotic. Like somehow they don't love our country. Just because they happen to be African Americans. And so Trump is a dangerous figure. He came out recently, he said he reposted a posting. I think it was mega.com did a poster with an ominous look of Trump's face. It was like a black and white ominous look on Trump's face, a black and white photograph. And it was a poster for re-election for 2024. And so it was like a commercial advertising campaign. So it's a commercial that had Trump's face ominously posted in the video, and then it hurt the people that did it, the promotion for Trump re-election for 24. It had Trump saying, "If you fuck with us, I'm gonna do things to y'all never thought possible." So Trump seen that posting of advertising. It wasn't done by him. It was done by a organization that supports Trump. But Trump reposted it on his social network account of I think he reposted it. He heard it, he liked it, and he reposted it. And so Trump is directly threatening prosecutors because they happen to be African Americans. The same way he referred to stop and frisk right after he says it's reverse racism by attorney generals, that he's going to vet out any African American attorney generals just because the color of their skins from the Justice Department, and that that's what he's insinuating, and then he's going to initiate stop and frisk because of the riots that took place under his administration, the African American riots. And I blame it on Trump that the riots took place, because Trump, if you remember, and if you look back into his administration, when Charlottesville incident happens with tiki torch Nazis marching around General Lee, Trump went to all his rallies after that, after saying that there was fine peoples on both sides, and Trump went to his rallies and he started bragging about General Lee. General Lee knew how to fight wars. He even said General Lee was one of the great generals that America had in the army. In other words, he said General Lee knew how to fight wars. He always took the high ground, but unfortunately, his last battle, he got caught on low ground, and you know how that went. So Trump was saying that at the Charlottesville, and that he's not going to cancel the monuments. But when it comes to African Americans, they don't have the right to speak critical of that, of Charlottesville. Let alone they don't have the right to abolish the monument of General Lee. So he's trying to make it seem like Africans are being racist, but in reality, he's bigoted. And then so after Charlottesville Nazis defending General Lee and Trump saying that's a part of a proud American history, that he's not going to cancel culture, but he wants to cancel and assault the civil rights movement of African Americans from being able to kneel and pray with their hands over their hearts while the national anthem is being played, which to me is admirable and honorable. Just like the great Martin Luther King kneeled and prayed in the streets for civil rights awareness, to me is admirable. So Trump is trying to make it seem like he has the right to protect General Lee, and he's defending the statue of Lee, so he doesn't want to cancel culture. But when it comes to Africans speaking sharply about Nazis marching around General Lee, they don't have the right to do that. The way he's portraying it, so all of a sudden, he's insinuating that because the color of the skin of two attorney generals, somehow the Justice Department is doing reverse racism. And then Trump is going to start to initiate stop and frisk, threatening, in other words, if there's any riots, potential riots, America has the right to stop and frisk under his administration. And that he's going to cancel critical race theory, because he's denying Africans the right to teach in schools the Martin Luther King civil rights era, or the liberation of slavery. So somehow he finds that offensive, because the way Trump was insinuating how General Lee was a great general and how the General Lee monument is a proud part of American history, he was in those same rallies where he was speaking like that about General Lee and defending the monuments, and he's against cancel culture when it comes to white supremacy as far as monuments of General Lee. So he started, the Africans in the same rallies, he started saying about they're disrespecting our flag. They don't love our country. These are son of a bitches. They should get fired. Referring to all the sports players, because by then it was basketball players, baseball players, football players that were kneeling and praying with their hands over their hearts for awareness to God, for civil rights, because they see what was going on with Charlottesville in this country and how Trump was defending the General Lee statues. And so that kept on going on for a couple months before the George Floyd riots broke out, because the Africans couldn't take no more of Trump's demagoguery. And the George Floyd incident was just a catalyst that set off the riots. It was because Trump kept on subverting and not giving awareness that the Africans' civil rights were being oppressed, especially by Tiki Torch Nazis marching around General Lee. But when it's in his interest, he'll defend the proud history of Confederacy. He will prevent the cancel culture from banning Confederate flags or banning Confederate statues, because in his opinion, that's cancel culture. But when Africans kneel and pray for civil rights awareness, somehow that's critical race theory, and it's reverse racism. And they're unpatriotic. In Trump's own words, that's what he's referring to. But now he put on he reposted a recording of himself that was posted. That was an ominous threat that he reposted, but he was reposting it and directing it towards the Department of Justice, saying, if you fuck with me, I'm going to do things to y'all you never thought possible. So when he says, it's reverse racism because the attorney generals in Georgia and New York, Attorney Braggs and Letitia James, happen to be Africans. He wants to now crack down on any African attorney general within the Justice Department. Anybody that happens to be African has to be racist towards Trump. That's how he perceives it. And now he's going to initiate stop and frisk to prevent protests by Africans under his administration. That's what he's referring to when he says, I'm a vet out the Justice Department, and then I'm a initiate stop and frisk, and I'm a cancel critical race being taught in our schools, because at the end of the day, he's rubbing salt in the wounds of African Americans. You know what Trump said about the wall? He said, I'm building a wall. And there was a judge that happened to be Mexican, an American Mexican judge, and they were judging about some issue when it came to the wall and migrations, or it was in a courtroom, and the American judge that happened to be persuading over that case was Mexican. Trump says he got to recuse himself because I'm building a wall and he's Mexican. He said that about a Mexican judge. So, at the end of the day, Trump Jr., when a deranged Trump supporter broke into Nancy Pelosi's house and took Nancy Pelosi's husband captive, soon as the cops came in, this deranged Trump supporter lunged with a hammer and cracked his skull. This guy was heavy set. He was heavy set, and he swung like he was swinging a bat. And he hit Nancy Pelosi with a hammer. Nancy Pelosi's husband with a hammer over his head. And Trump the next day Trump Jr. posted a picture of a pair of white underwears with a hammer, saying that was going to be his Halloween costume. You know, Trump militias in Michigan, there was a Michigan governor, under the corona epidemic, Trump was insinuating for herd immunity when the virus broke out. He was insinuating that don't wear masks, you don't have to. And he was holding mass rallies insisting that the supporters don't wear masks, that somehow herd immunity would take care of it. So the governor of Michigan, she had quarantine just as well as any other country around the world had quarantines. But this was at the beginning of the corona epidemic, so the nations were just beginning to phase in masks and distance quarantines, wearing masks in public. So Trump kept on preaching about herd immunity, that that he kept on ushering in his rallies that you don't have to wear masks. So the Michigan governor, she was insinuating for people to wear masks at the beginning of the plague, for people to wear masks and cover up their face when they're in public. And so Trump's terrorist militias occupied the governor's mansion because Trump was saying don't wear masks. So Trump terrorist armed militia with assault rifles were occupying and terrorizing the governor in the governor's mansion. And they planned to kidnap her and execute her in a firing squad. And then Trump bragged about, after the fact, he bragged about in his rallies, I don't know why she doesn't like me. I don't know why she's making a big deal of me. It was my FBI's that saved her life. Maybe I was wrong. In other words, that maybe he was wrong for spoiling the plot with the FBI's. In other words, maybe he should have never saved her life with the FBI. He said that at his rallies. That I don't know why she don't get along with me. Maybe it was me that saved her life with the FBI. Man, maybe I was wrong. He said it callously like that. That maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have let the terrorist kidnap her and execute her in a firing squad. That was the gist of his comment. Trump is riling up terrorism in this nation. He's riling up white extremist terrorism. White people that have a grudge against Latino because they look at all of us. Trump's base looks at all the Latinos like we're potential deportations. Regardless of our status of citizenship, he wants to round up as many migrants and deport them. He wants to round up his base into thinking that every migrant that they see in America must be an illegal migrant. In other words, xenophobia, because he's denigrating the integrity, the human decency of if you're human as a leader, you shouldn't denigrate because where you come from. As far as your Latino migrants, I remember when Coney Island, when Europeans were coming through Coney Island, especially after World War II, they were holding the American flag. They were coming through Coney Island, and that was the golden age of the baby boomer generation in America. What if we would have a president that would have been demagoguing those migrants, saying, these are criminals, these are rapists, they're emptying out their jails, they're sending us their worst, they're emptying out their mental wards, they're coming over here with anchor babies, crossing the Atlantic with the Pacific with pregnant women. Soon as they come through Coney Island, they land and they drop an anchor baby. You know what this baby is? Welfare from the cradle to the grave. I would deport them. Imagine if we had a leader talking about migrants from Europe that way. So it's a double standard. When you're migrants coming through the southern border, you're subhumans. You're deviants. You're parasites. But when you come to Coney Island, you're the American dream. You know, Marjorie Taylor Greene, when she first made it into office because of Trump's support, Marjorie Taylor Greene wanted to pass a law that she said we should stop migrations that are from the rest of the world, from the third world. We should only accept migrations that come from Western Europe. And the way she was insinuating to regentrify America with only white migrants from Western Europe. That if you happen to be African, Asian, Arab, Latino, you're not allowed to migrate. Under her policy, she was insinuating that the immigration department should only accept Western Europe migrants and eliminate any migrations from Latin America, Africa, Asia, the Middle East. You know what Trump Jr. said about, I think it was Kentucky, if I remember correctly, the state Kentucky, while Trump was in office. Kentucky had a Confederate flag. I don't know if it was Kentucky or Mississippi, between one of those. They had a Confederate flag while Trump was in office. So when the riots broke out, because Trump insensitivity, bragging about General Lee in Charlottesville, how he wants to protect the proud monuments of General Lee, and the Confederate flags and the Confederate named bases in the Pentagon. Trump was defending that. Trump Jr. said, I think it was Mississippi or Kentucky, they had a Confederate flag as their state flag. So when the riots broke out, because Trump in those same rallies when he was defending General Lee, in those same rallies, Trump was talking about how they're disrespecting the flag. They don't love our country. These are people that hate our country, meaning African Americans throughout this country, because they happened to kneel and with their hands over their heart, they were praying to God for awareness against the political oppression of Trump's administration, bragging about General Lee. So that festered. So when George Floyd got killed by cops, it broke out riots. Anyway, So Trump Jr., and they abolished around that time when the riots were taking place, when the Congress members under Nancy Pelosi leadership were kneeling and praying in the rotunda for civil rights awareness to African Americans, Trump Jr. was saying about the Kentucky or Mississippi flag they switched it up. They abolished the Confederate flag as their state flag. And Trump Jr. went to that state and said, I don't see what the big hoopla was about, meaning abolishing the Confederate flag. He said, I don't see what a big hoopla was that about. It's part of a proud tradition. There's nothing wrong with traditions. Because he was disappointed that that particular state abolished the Confederate flag for being their state flag. So at the end of the day, Trump is a terrorist leader. He is a tyrannic leader. He went to the swing states to subvert Latinos and Africans to see if he can remove 7 million votes off the tally. And now he's denying them the right. You know what Trump said, that it just boggles the mind. It just boggles the mind to me. It boggles it. Trump says that his January 6th speech, at one of his speaking events, he said that his January 6th speech was a hell of a speech. A hell of a good speech. He even said, and it was better than Martin Luther King's. This is the same speech that because of Trump, January 6th, 4 Capitol police officers died. They almost hanged his vice president, which Trump said after the fact. I can see why they wanted to hang him. He said that after January 6th. Trump said, I can see why they wanted to hang him. And then Kamala Harris, the incumbent vice president, almost got blown up with 2 pipe bombs. And so somehow, in Trump's head, January 6th was better than Martin Luther King. I had a dream speech. And then somehow, his crowds were bigger than Martin Luther King. He said it with a smirk, too. My crowds were bigger than his. And it boggles the mind that Trump is the nominee for 2024 for the Republicans. It boggles the mind. America done come a long way since Martin Luther King. But to backtrack because of Trump and fall back into the trap of tyranny and hatred and bigotry because of race, discrimination against entire ethnic groups because of our ethnicity. And you telling us that we don't get the right to kneel and pray under the national anthem for righteousness to be adhered to. Somehow we're critical when we say General Lee with Nazis marching around it, preaching, you will not replace us, meaning Africans, Latinos, Jewish, Asians, Muslims. For Trump to defend General Lee and brag about General Lee right after Charlottesville when he said there were fine peoples on both sides. That's why people like Martin Luther King brought this nation forward and liberated the hatred of white bigotry. And so somehow we're not allowed to teach that at our high schools or in our colleges or argue critically why we should defend General Lee when we got Nazis saying that you will not replace us, meaning ethnic groups, religious groups. And for Trump to be the leader of this country and said there was fine peoples on both sides. And how General Lee was a great general. He knew how to fight wars. Unfortunately, his last battle, he got caught on the low ground, and you know how that went. That's what he was saying at his rallies. And then in the same breath, they're disrespecting our country. They don't love our country. They're disrespecting the flag. And then in the same interviews, he's going to defend General Lee's statues because it's part of a proud tradition. And he doesn't want to cancel culture. But when Africans kneel and pray for respect to their civil rights, somehow he wants to cancel critical race theory and abolish the right for high schools to teach civil rights of African Americans, or civil rights of activists like Cesar Chavez when it comes to migrants, the decency of migrants, the human integrity of good migrants that are just as much as good and equal as the migrants that came through Coney Island when America received the Statue of Liberty right after World War II, when the baby boomer generations, along with migrants that were seeking the American dream, came. There shouldn't be a double standard in this country. There shouldn't be a double standard. Not on race, not on religion, and not on origins based on your heritage and ethnicity. If America becomes a land of bigotry, a land of Nazis marching around General Lee and the president bragging about how that's so great, how he will defend the Confederate named bases, how he will defend the Confederate flags, and then for people to, decent human beings like Martin Luther King, these sports players kneeled, baseball players, football players, basketball players, and they prayed because they seen the tyranny of Nazis marching around General Lee and how much the president was loving it. Every second of it, Trump was loving. And then Trump said, these are unpatriotic son of a bitches. They should be fired. And now he's trying to say, I will vet the Justice Department of any African Americans. Because he thinks it's reverse racism on him and his movement and his base. So he wants to promote the Confederacy, brag about General Lee. But when decent people kneel, like Martin Luther King did in the middle of the streets to pray for civil rights awareness, that was the same thing that those football players were doing. Basketball, baseball players were doing. Nancy Pelosi with the Democratic representatives kneeling in the rotunda and praying. That's righteousness. That's decency. That's integrity. That all humans are created equal with unalienable rights. But when you see hatreds of Nazis saying you will not replace us, referring to minorities and Jewish and Arabs, Muslims, Asians, Africans, Latinos, and then you have a corrupt president like Trump adoring them. And now he defends their right and prevents their movement from being canceled. Like he was defending the Confederate General Lee and bragging about how much he knew how to fight wars, and then bragging about how he would defend the Confederate named bases in the Pentagon. When our soldiers died, Africans and Latinos died to defend this country. And he's rubbing Charlottesville on the integrities of our enlisted soldiers. Somehow they're supposed to fight under a banner of Confederate named bases, while the president is bragging about General Lee's and how fine people's on both sides of Charlottesville. And then he's denying Africans to be heard when they pray for awareness as peaceful protesters. And it took a while for the riots to break out, but you can see why it broke out. You can see why. So I say again, there shouldn't be a double standard between Coney Island and the southern border, or any migrants that originate from the third world. Whether you be Latino from South America, whether you be African from Africa, whether you be Arab, Muslim from the Middle East, whether you be Asians. We shouldn't have a leader in this country that defends you will not replace us policies and subvert our wills to be counted as decent human beings. No, Trump, we don't come from shithole places. No, we shouldn't go back from which we came. We sing a voice of freedom. You know, when I was in elementary school and I graduated, I was on stage with the rest of the graduate students singing, "Let freedom ring, sing a song, sing a freedom of songs." And that was about the Liberty Bell. And that was about liberation, because I got taught Martin Luther King in elementary school. And I'm not gonna let no tiki torch Nazis or a president that adores that you will not replace us theory. I like Carson Tucker in Fox News. He says, I call this the great replacement theory. They're trying to dilute our white majority. They're trying to replace us with non-Americans. And Carson Tucker considered the tiki torch Nazis the replacement theory. Carson Tucker called it the great replacement theory, because he thought it was that he believed what they were preaching, that they're trying to devaluate white Americans with migrants that are not Western ethnic migrants to America. That somehow they're trying to flow too many migrants from the rest of Africa, South America, the Middle East, or Asia. So they're trying to devaluate the white American majority in the Republic of North America. That's how they look at it. When Carson Tucker preaches and adores the great replacement theory. I'm glad he got fired. But Trump is still festering. And that's what's mind-boggling to me. He's receiving the nomination again. And that's what's bewildering me. That this country is forgetting how to dream. That this country is forgetting how to dream. Like the great Martin Luther King.